The power of voice and voices is a potent and compelling tool to be used in the face of injustice. Poets, scholars, students, coaches, and administrators alike have this tool to use. Maybe Yuri can teach us all how. Our artist, Yuri Berry, is a strategic innovator and PhD candidate at Pepperdine University. She's an orator, writer, and published poet who has delivered a keynote address at Facebook's headquarters, performed at the Kennedy Center, and empowered thousands through her spoken word from the pulpit of the historic Washington National Cathedral. A passionate mentor and youth advocate, Berry created the Dream Girls Summit, a holistic multi-day conference that gave hundreds of middle and high school girls the opportunity to shadow science, technology, engineering, and math professionals in the workplace. This work led to her being nominated a changemaker at the first ever White House Summit on the United States of Women. A justice warrior, a champion of equity, committed to elevating marginalized voices and communities, please welcome Yuri Berry.
Thank you for the introduction, for the invitation, for the opportunity to share in this critical forum and elevate the inclusion conversation. I applaud the NCAA for cultivating what I believe to be a safe space that will stretch us far beyond our comfort zones and into closer community with one another as we endeavor to be the change we hope to see. Good afternoon. The first thing I have to warn you is that I tried to write a complete poem, to do that the entire time, but that is not exactly what happened. You see, yesterday I was a bit nervous about speaking before you today. I was nervous, not about speaking, but because I knew I needed it to be honest, and sometimes pure, unfiltered honesty is challenging. I was nervous, so I did what any responsible young adult would do. I took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and called my mama. I said, "Ma, I'm speaking about inclusion tomorrow, and I'm a bit nervous and afraid. Because speaking about inclusion means that I just might need to be brave." What she said was, "Don't go attacking people, invoking guilt, shame, and placing blame, but go with a pure heart and treat this as an opportunity to do things differently and an invitation to create change." So if you allow me, I would like to treat this moment, this conversation, this something like a poem, but not really a poem, rather a rhythmic exchange, as an invitation to do things differently and an opportunity for every single soul gathered in this space to think about how we will be, not might be, not hopefully, how we will be moved to action beyond this week and go forth to create change. You see, this conversation is hard and it is uncomfortable, not just for you, but for me. I rarely struggle or become emotional while preparing for professional events such as this, but today is different, and it's different because we have an opportunity to be different, to be brave, to be bold, to be more compassionate and empathetic, to be willing to listen and willing to learn and take what we've learned here today and over the next 3 days and be courageous leaders, determined to work and do things differently. Before today, there was only one word monopolizing my brain: imposter. Imposter. Before I can jump to inclusion, I must interrogate why my mind could not escape the thought that I, here before you today, an imposter, a fraud, a fake, because I wasn't sure that I belonged. In fact, mere hours ago, I asked myself if perhaps the NCAA was wrong in inviting me to speak and sing a poetic song about inclusion, which literally means included. But when you're native to a marginalized group and not used to being included, when historically the voices, perspectives, stories, and songs of people who look, live, or love like you have been muted, that moment you're finally invited into the room and asked to speak your truth, and some part of you wonders if this is an authentic invitation to walk into a space not needing to check any part of who you are at the door, or is this just another day where you're still just 3/5 human, tasked with making your raw, unedited, unfiltered, unquestionably deeply painful chapters of your lived experience more polished and palatable for mass consuming, to pretty up and water down, masterfully diluting the heartbreak of erasure and being excluded, a cyclical, unseen psychological violence. So yes, that moment when you're finally invited into the room and given an opportunity to speak, sometimes the only language left within you is silence. And I'd be lying. I swear I'd be lying if I said the insecurities within me birthing from years of invisibility wasn't almost successful in ensuring my refusal to go beyond my comfort zone today and speak truth to power, unafraid. But it's as if I could hear the matriarchs and ancestors who've gone before me whispering, I didn't live through hell and endure the impossible for you to walk through life believing you have the option to not be brave. I didn't live through hell and endure the impossible for you to walk through life believing you have the option to not be brave. See, for me, if inclusion is indeed our collective aim, I, you, we do not have the option to walk through life and not be brave. So today I have for you only one question. What if we dared to be brave? What if we dared to be brave? To be honest about our unspoken truth, our pain and our rage, our bias, our ignorance, our privilege, our incompetence, our arrogance to gather in rooms and make decisions for and on behalf of people disproportionately represented or perhaps not represented at all in that space, then wonder why some feel excluded without a place as they walk from one room to another where not a single person shares their story, their struggle, or their face, and expect them to genuinely believe us when we say we are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. You see, sometimes we do this human hierarchy thing without even trying, resulting in conscious and unconscious othering that has penetrated the very fabric of our society and our culture over time. A messaging affirming some of us are more human than others, are more worthy than others, are more valued than others, are more respected and protected than others, not based on the content of their character, capabilities, or competence, rather solely based on what meets the eye. So if we truly want to do inclusion authentically, we must be courageous enough to obliterate our refusal to get uncomfortable being uncomfortable and take a deeper dive. If you are in a safe space right now, I invite you to close your eyes. Unless you're on a treadmill or a long drive, please keep those eyes open because we need you alive. But if you are able, I invite you for just a few seconds to close your eyes. I want you to think of a time in your life when you were excluded. A time in your life when you were excluded. And with your eyes still closed, once that memory comes to mind, I want you to think of one word to describe how it made you feel. How it made you feel. Now, still with your eyes closed, I want to ask you to ask yourself and honestly answer, have you fully healed? For those able to engage, I thank you and invite you to open your eyes And if you so desire, if there's a chat box, if you could drop in the chat box the one word of how being excluded makes you feel and made you feel. See, if you're like me, it only takes a few seconds to resurrect just one memory regarding a time in my life I was excluded. Now, I want you to honestly think of a time in your life, whether consciously or unintentionally, you were the one who did the excluding. You see, the thing about being brave is also being audacious enough to call a thing, to own that, yes, you have been excluded, that, yes, you too have been the one doing the excluding. Consequently, the bottom line is unjustifiable exclusion has the power to make us feel less human. So why would we ever consciously do it? And while the responsibility should never be solely placed on one group of people, especially marginalized people, to single-handedly solve systemic injustices and inequalities that persist in our society, sometimes we cannot effectively and sustainably move the needle forward regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion because we have not been honest with ourselves and with others about our stories, our struggles, and our pain, because DEI remains a mere acronym without a human pulse or a human face. The first time I was ever conscious that my unique differences may not always be celebrated and praised, rather serve as barriers to excelling and thriving in a given space, I believe I was only 8. Growing up in New Orleans, the big, easy, born and raised, when my great-grandmother, a soft-spoken woman without a high school education, looked me in the eye and said, in this life, you will have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Who tells a child that? I won't even pretend to understand what she meant on that day. I only remember the sweet smile normally illuminating her face was replaced with a more serious and hauntingly hollow gaze, as if she were proficient in training day in and day out for a race she would probably never win because her starting point was so far behind the starting line, because she had no access and she had no track and she had no trainer and she had no shoes. And it likely didn't matter how hard she worked or how many years she spent putting in time and paying her dues. But to my adolescent ears, her words still didn't resonate and left me perplexed and confused. That was until sophomore year in college. I was still a teen attending a D1 university, and I just successfully been crowned queen of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated's Miss Black and Gold Scholarship pageant at my predominantly white university, where Black students made up 7% of the population, and a group of students who referred to themselves as a secret society for a white university crossed out queen and spray painted nigger on a large poster announcing my win in the student center, and nigger lover on the dorm room door of a white fraternity member. That was the day I truly understood what it felt like to be erased. To have this internal, often unspoken, gut-wrenching, silent pain of coming to terms with the truth that I was standing in a space surrounded by voices affirming you do not belong here. See, inclusion is about belonging. I admit growing up in a city whose motto is let the good times roll, where strangers of different backgrounds and colors and creeds effortlessly bond more over things like Mardi Gras beads, crawfish gumbo, Essence Jazz Fest, rice and red beans. Up until that very moment, I was naive and had no true concept that any part of my identity would ever be a barrier in this life or a liability. Yet that was the moment I was clear. I I wasn't living in a post-racial society. Rather, one where in the 21st century, in a country that professes to be among the most progressive and developed on this earth, we were still judging, still hating, still excluding people not based on their character, performance, competence, potential, and infinite possibilities, but something as frivolous as racial, ethnic, and gender identities. I wish I could say my experience is an exception and a rare case, but it's not. So my question remains, what if we dared to be brave? What if we dared to be brave? Because most children aren't lucky enough to grow up and be 19 like me before encountering racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, lacking disability sensitivity, religious intolerance, and other unjust leaders and systems in which their very existence is disregarded and dehumanized. The consequence of not consistently and authentically practicing diversity, equity, and inclusion in every space at every level isn't just hurt feelings that might make you question your worth and cry, but literally lack of access and opportunities that permanently alter the trajectory of people's lives. I wish we had the luxury of patience and time on our side, but I know there are children in rural Montana and Chicago's South Side who are looking to every single one of us as teachers and guides. So we are going to have to continue to do more than being complacent in our mediocrity and patting ourselves on the back for doing the bare minimum. Or are we truly about that life and willing to commit to individually, institutionally, and collectively doing what needs to be done so every human being we encounter on this earth has a fair shot at life, not merely one where they live between struggles and beneath glass ceilings only to survive, but one where access and opportunity is available to serve as a launching pad for them to truly thrive? What is inclusion without equity, and equity without authenticity, and authenticity without bravery? See, the question is, how long will ignorance be our excuse? How long will complacency and comfort be our scapegoat? How long will fear and resistance to change be the reason why we did not leave our world, country, organizations, and communities better than we found it when we came? Inclusion is more than a mere seat at the table. It is an unmuted voice amplified in the room. It is giving sound to those historically silenced. It is ears that listen and hearts that move. It is souls that care and feet that dare to walk roads uncharted and unpaved. It is bodacious, unrelenting audacity to be brave. It is courage to stand up, to speak up and say, I will not stand back and stand by while others continue to be excluded solely on the basis of culture, age, disability, weight, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, language, gender, or race. Not on my watch, not now, not ever again, and certainly not today. It is cognizance regarding the words and wisdom of MLK, affirming injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It is being brave enough to admit blind spots do exist, and that pure intentions to do no harm doesn't mean harm was never inflicted. It is reckoning and consciously having hard conversations, reconciliation and penance. It is unyielding persistence to do the right thing even when it is hard, to do the just thing even when it is unpopular, to always ask who's not in the room or at the table, and pledge to stand up so that everyone not represented has the opportunity to wholly contribute and speak their truth to power too. You see, as the sister of a former Division I athlete and NFL first-round draft pick, I've witnessed firsthand just how masterfully your brilliant leaders are regarding college athlete recruitment. So I challenge us to keep that same energy and intentionality in recruiting, fairly promoting and providing access to people of diverse backgrounds to serve in top leadership positions for our teams and institutions. Inclusion is both an opportunity and a revolution, an opportunity to change culture, to shift the tenor of the environment, to not merely be open but affirming, to know that sometimes true leadership is sitting down, shutting up, and being open to learning, to understand that merely hiring DEI leaders and chief diversity officers is not a holistic solution and doesn't instantaneously shift the culture. There is no need to not be honest, because there is the need to go deeper and farther, to cultivate safe spaces where every person has the freedom to be their whole self without need to check some part of their experience and identities at the door. See, while we need your help, your leadership, and your solidarity in advocating for true equity, inclusion, and diversity, if it's all words and no long-term sustainable action, keep it. Our children on college campuses, in high, middle, elementary school classrooms, and those not yet born need us to be better, do better, to create a world that celebrates rather than separates based on differences that makes each of us unique. They don't need our empty diversity, equity, and inclusion statements and promises that do nothing more than boost our brand equity. They don't need us posting black boxes on social media purporting to align with and affirm women, those with disabilities, the LGBTQ community, the lives of Black, Indigenous, and people of color and others marginalized for centuries. Yet the women and people of color in our organizations, institutions, universities, and companies aren't represented in executive leadership on our boards and still don't earn anywhere close to our white male counterparts. You see, if your budget, how you spend your money, your time, and your actions don't back up your words, respectfully keep it. But the thing is, I believe that every person here, regardless of who you are, how old you are, what color you are, and where you come from, has the power to be the change and dismantle systems of oppression right where you are, starting in your homes, with your families, and your communities, at your universities, in your athletic facilities, at your workplace, and in your boardrooms. I challenge us that when we go beyond today, we will keep working, keep fighting, keep holding ourselves accountable, our colleagues, our leaders, and systems accountable, and ensure that as we can be the solution to ensure that in our quest to be great, to serve and create change in our universities, companies, and communities, we are not simultaneously perpetuating practices and systems of exclusion and oppression, channeling the spirit of the brilliant John Lewis, who knew what it meant to challenge the status quo and be brave by causing good trouble, and the spirit of Dr. Maya Angelou, who affirmed that even out of the huts of history's shame, we rise up from a past that's rooted in pain. We rise, that even as we leave behind nights of terror and fear, we rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. We rise, bringing the gifts that our ancestors gave. We too are, can be, will be the dream and the hope of the slave, and we rise and we rise and we rise. And as I close, I beseech each of you here today that in our rising, we will also dare to be brave, dare to be honest, dare to listen with open hearts, open minds, open spirits, not hiding behind our comfort zones and fear of guilt and shame, that in every single step we take beyond today, we will not merely commit to ensuring equity and diversity for only ourselves, but the entire beloved community, and also carry with us the audacity of inclusivity as we endeavor to leave this world, our world, so much better than it was when we came. This we must do. Thank you.